Vaz. Vaz is another social research tool created by Wavelengths. And this is a photographic approach to a participatory needs assessment, which assesses various aspects of community life, community needs, community strengths, visions for change, visions for growth, visions for the future. Our user here is one of our interpreters, Gina DeWolf. Here you see her signing up and logging in. She hits the loading page here, and she's brought to the onboarding pages, which explains, it's an overview of the methodology. She can skip it if she wants, but she reads it, and she gets to the introduction to the tool page, how to use it. And she says okay. She hits her home screen or social feed. She goes to the search page. She goes back home. She knows she can organize. She can go to her profile. She's a designer and leathersmith, as well as a business owner in Boston. She goes back home, and she most importantly begins the research process. Here you can see some other interpreters. Here is the landing page. Each time she completes a step in the process, she begins with life context alignment. You can see her workspaces here. One of her active projects is Apple, so she wants to go in and do some research there. Her first step is to get aligned with the team members here, which you can see on the team member page. And she wants to communicate with everyone about the Siri Innovation Project. She says she's going to investigate the artist community in Boston. And then she moves along and starts the research process. The next step is self-reflexivity, where she picks either formative or evaluative research. In Vaz, you can either do formative or evaluative research. In formative research, in Vaz's approach to formative analysis, interpreters take and select photographs that most accurately reflect the community's needs and assets. They tell stories about what the photographs mean, and they identify significant issues, themes, or theories that emerge. In evaluative research, the photographic medium becomes a documentation for changes in their lives as a result of design or innovation. So they might use this as a design innovation has already become a part of the community to see what the kind of indicators for monitoring is and how they can represent outcomes in the community, which is rather interesting. So we're going to go with formative research. And then we hit the discovery phase. In the discovery phase, we identify a community and a behavior, much like in orality. She decides to investigate artists in Boston. Here, we notice that the photograph, the camera, is the only tool that she can use to document. It's specifically designed that way. And you'll also see that the app has a bit of an advanced photographic editing and filtering design to it. Here she can filter her photos, or she can edit them, and she likes how it is, so she says okay. She moves along to observing a behavior. She, like Nate in orality, notices that artists organize together to populate art shows to sell their art. This is good when you get two pieces of data that have an overlap or are very similar to one another. This is called external validation. So she documents artists gathering to sell their art. She decides if she wants to filter or edit. She clicks OK. She gets a confirmation screen, and she moves along to the documentation phase. So in the formative research process, Gina has, I believe, 8 questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, 8 question types to answer. And she begins with place or environment questions. This question's about her home place. She describes her home place. She gets a prompt here that's a general example, or she has a prompt and an example rather, and she describes her home place as Back Bay, the neighborhood where she's connected to artist friends. She documents that. She chooses a rad filter, and there she goes. Now she moves along to the environment in which she works. She says she works in her studio or her shop, wherever she can meet a potential buyer. So she photographs her shop, and she moves along there. So now this is her living place question. Interestingly, she kind of describes it as expensive and a little bit less ideal, which is an issue in Boston. That's a unique response. So she takes a photo there, she chooses to filter it, and she clicks OK. Now she describes, this is an unusual question, the place in which she plays. And she describes that as her studio because it's, unlike most adults, it's her work involves play and experimenting and collaboration. She documents that. Now she moves on to a loving environment question, another non-traditional question. She describes it as her studio because that's where her friends and community are. So she documents that. Now we move on to quality of life questions. She states that she values collaboration very much as part of her quality of life and access to buyers, so she documents that, a collaborative workshop. Here she documents community needs. She describes her community needs as, again, connection to buyers, so this is good. We're learning something about Gina here. So she documents that, selling her work. Now she moves on to the community strengths prompt. She describes her community strengths as her ability to organize and create community. So here she takes a photo of someone who's become a friend through purchasing her product that's a part of the community around here. Okay, now we're moving on to cultural symbols questions, another non-traditional question. She describes cultural symbols as important galleries and other spaces that are revered to get into. She documents that. Now we move on to life issues questions. She describes an issue that's central to her life as having a steady income or a steady connection to buyers or brokers to regularly purchase pieces. That's an issue, not having a steady paycheck. So here's a photograph of not a busy day that might be a little stressful, or maybe some just time to relax in the studio. That's what it looks like. Here's some individual change questions that ask concerns for individual development, desire to be able to support herself as she grows older and her family grows larger. So here's a photograph that represents that. Here's a similar question about individual change. She describes rising challenges that she and others in her community face, where they start to think about how their life is changing in terms of starting a family. So she documents that as well. And now we're on to community commonality questions. What views she has in common with the community. She says that that similar to that individual change question, as her life evolves, how she can support herself with her work. This is a photograph of her friend who is in that stage of her life, starting a family. And now she describes how her views differ from others in her community. And she says that some people are just okay with doing their craft and not so worried about or motivated about becoming lucrative. So she takes a photograph of just fun artwork, artists having fun with their art, and just putting on shows and having fun making quirky, colorful artwork. So now Gina's finished with documentation, and she moves on to contextualization, where she narrates and captions her photographs. Gina selects a confessional tale, which convinces the audience of the interpreter's human qualities. She moves along. She goes to the sharing stage, where she begins to select a photo and writes her caption here. She checks off each different important aspect of the confessional tale to hit. She shares the confessional tale. She has an opportunity to edit it, but she didn't, so she now moves on to the organizing phase. In the organizing phase, she begins to rank a colleague's post. She finds Nate's. She likes Nate's, and she uses Roberto Verganti's design-driven innovation criteria for ranking a design innovation. And she's finished. And she's back at her home screen. So that's a brief overview of how Vaz works. Again, it's a photographic research tool that answers a participatory needs assessment model of questioning. And it's a really unique way to have insights into important aspects of your own life and your community life, and to come up with interesting interpretations for design innovations.